The day did not so much begin as struggle into existence. What little light the morning offered spread itself reluctantly across the cloud-choked sky, pale and colorless, casting no warmth on the world below. In Ashford Hollow, the old Blackwood estate absorbed that light without reflection. Its dark Victorian frame hunched against the hills like a weary sentinel. Clara. Blackwood hesitated in the grand hallway before stepping foot into the chamber. She had avoided for months the bedchamber of her great-grandmother, Evelyn. The door was tall, its brass handle greened with tarnish, its oak panels scraped by years of expansion and shrinking in damp seasons. She turned the knob slowly, the groan of the hinges alarmingly human in their complaint. A draft met her immediately. Strangely cool, despite the house being sealed since spring. Dust stirred with her entrance, catching in her throat and rising to swirl in the dim stream of light that bled through yellow lace curtains. There was no sound beyond her own heartbeat, yet the silence that gathered around her did not resemble peace. It was the silence of spaces too long unobserved, a hush that seemed to wait and listen. The room bore every sign of abandonment: furniture cloaked in linen sheeting, wallpaper yellowing into sagging strips, a faint perfume of mildew woven thin with something unexpected, the delicate sweetness of dried flowers. Clara breathed it in carefully, uneasy at how it suggested both reverence and decay. Her eyes roved the bed frame with its carved posts, the warped glass of a mirror that refused to reflect with clarity, the fireplace blackened by soot but long cold. For just a moment, she considered turning back, letting the house and all its buried secrets remain untouched. But hesitation had been her companion long enough. She had inherited the estate 6 months ago, when her mother died, her mother who never once set foot back inside these walls herself. Clara was 31 years old, unmarried, without children, and invested wholly in her work as an archivist in Boston. She had spent 10 years rescuing strangers' memories from oblivion, crumbling ledgers, sepia portraits, letters never sent. Yet she had resisted inheriting her own history. When the estate lawyer had placed the deeds into her hands, the Blackwood name inked in stark, official print, she had felt not pride but dread. Roots had a way of clinging, whether one wanted them or not. She pushed deeper into the room, and her gaze immediately fell to the far corner, where a cedar chest waited, lined against discolored plaster. She froze. The chest was large, more a footlocker than a box, and its lid bowed slightly with age. Ornately carved roses and vines coiled across its front, dulled by decades of dust. Brass brackets cupped its corners, their edges encrusted green. A small lock gleamed at its center with smug resistance. Her hand instinctively reached for her pocket. The key was already there, brass as well, cool and incongruously clean. She had found it weeks ago in her mother's jewelry box, tucked behind cheaper rings and brooches, heavy enough to suggest importance. Something in her had known before ever stepping foot here that this key was meant for this chest. Dreams in the intervening weeks had confirmed it. Indistinct images of locks, of something waiting to be opened. The key slid into the ward like recognition. The click when she turned it echoed faintly in the empty chamber. A long exhalation of trapped air rose when she pried the lid open, carrying with it a smell unlike the rest of the room. It was aged cedar, yes, but sharp with perfume, floral soap, and something metallic beneath, a scent of things meant to be remembered but buried all the same. Inside lay the past, bundles of letters spilled across the top, ribbon ties stiffened to powder, envelopes browned and softened at the edges, their ink spreading in veins from damp contact. Clara reached tentatively, unfolding one. The penmanship was delicate, slanted, and elegant, though the words were too blurred to read clearly. She laid it aside with reverence. Next came photographs, carts to visit, mounted cabinet portraits, oval frames of stiff-backed family members with gaunt expressions. Some she recognized vaguely from her childhood home's gallery wall. Others were strangers, attired in stately clothes, but with eyes hollow from the long exposures of photography's early decades. She instinctively catalogued them as she would archival work, likely 1880s. Sepia toning, moderate exposure damage, safe, familiar, but then deeper beneath. She found smaller objects, pressed flowers flattened brittle between sheets of tissue, a child's wooden spinning top worn smooth by vanished hands, a narrow length of ribbon stiff with age. It was a private museum, curated by someone who wanted to mark the years without speaking of them. She reached lower dot, and her hand closed on the edge of something framed. It was large, oval, heavy enough to make her nervous about lifting it too. Quickly, gilt edging peeked through like sickly sunlight beneath dirt. She eased it upward carefully, displacing decades of dust, until at last a frame lay across the cedar's open lid. Its picture turned away as though someone had placed it down deliberately, not dropped, but hidden. Her mouth went dry. Slowly, almost ritualistically, she turned it face up. The nursery greeted her. The etched date struck her. 1st, 1913. She blinked. The image was crisp, despite its age. A child's room, a nursery staged so perfectly, it seemed more like a theater set than a lived-in space. There was the cradle, high-sided and carved, polished darker than coffin oak. A rocking horse stilled mid-gallop. Shelves behind carried a parade of toys, porcelain dolls watching with glass eyes, a drum, soldiers of tin, and infants' picture books. No clutter, no wear, only the staged stillness of money buying perfection. At the center, seated straight as steel in a high-back chair, was a young woman in an Edwardian gown. Evelyn Clara had seen images of her great-grandmother, one's older, harder. This Evelyn was younger, her gown immaculate, her posture rigid. Yet if one did not know to look, perhaps one might miss the tautness of her expression, the lips pressed too tightly, the eyes set wide, a muscle drawn taut along the jaw. It was a face not of maternal pride, but of vigil. In her lap rested the child. The infant's face startled Clara. Babies in such portraits were usually blurred, movement uncooperative for the 10-second exposure times. They appeared vacant, sleepy, or merely confused. But this child, 6 months, at most met the camera's gaze directly. The stare was fixed, steady, horrifying in its clarity. Clara felt its eyes meeting hers now, not the lens of some long-dead photographer. The christening gown was lace and silk, fine enough for nobility. It spilled across Evelyn's lap like a froth of white sea foam, and against it, a darker gleam. The locket, small, oval, metallic yet not delicate in design. The chain around the child's throat linked to a pendant that hung centered upon its chest. Even in monochrome grain, its surface shone with unnatural clarity. Clara leaned forward instinctively, as though pulled. Her archival satchel balanced against her hip. Almost without thinking, she drew her magnifying lens out. Holding it above the photograph, she studied the pendant closer. It was not decor lines. Etched in its metal spiraled inward. Circles cut through triangles. Intersections curled into loops. At first, they seemed filigree, decorative curls of Victorian metal. But the longer she stared, the more deliberate they became, forming a figure recognizable only in the way nightmares often are, haunting not because they are familiar, but because they seem to exist in your mind before your eyes confirm them. An inverted star, flaring points enclosed in circles, markings twisted into each edge that were not flourishes but symbols. She drew back, blinking hard. Her mouth was dry. This was not ornamentation. Something pressed upon her scalp, as though the room had grown heavier with knowledge. "Who were you?" she whispered aloud, surprising herself with the sound. It was not Evelyn, she asked, but the child, because her family line insisted Evelyn's firstborn had been Richard, her grandfather. In 1922, there had been no child in 1913. None had ever been spoken of, and yet here it was. documented, christened, wearing a pendant etched with symbols Clara had only seen in the margins of half-forgotten occult tracts that occasionally surfaced in archives, always dismissed as eccentric ornament. The room seemed to grow colder the longer she stared. Her skin prickled. She closed her eyes and opened them again. The portrait had not changed. Of course it hadn't, but she found more in it now than before. The dolls looked less passive, more attentive. The rocking horse seemed braced to move. Evelyn's tense expression radiated silent warning. The baby stared still, locket gleaming eyes, unblinking. Clara tore her gaze away, just long enough to glance back at the cedar chest. Her shaking hands sifted lower, searching. And there, pressed beneath the photographed mementos, she found what she feared she would, a journal bound in thin red leather, its front spine cracked with age, its cover faded, nearly brown. She opened it gently. On the first page, elegant handwriting declared, "The Private Journal of Evelyn Rose Blackwood." Clara's breath caught. She closed it as if it burned. Her gaze dragged itself back to the portrait. The locket glowed, still in monochrome tones, and this child, who was not supposed to exist, bore down upon her with the weight of generations. And though the air of the room was thin with dust, she felt suddenly as though the house had inhaled, waiting for her to turn the page, waiting for her to begin. The red leather journal trembled in Clara's hands, not from movement of the object itself, but from something subtler, an anticipation, a heaviness humming along her fingertips, as if the words within yearned to unburden themselves after a century of suffocating silence. She did not yet dare to open it again. Already she felt complicit, a voyeur, at the threshold of her family's most forbidden room. The nursery portrait leaned against the cedar chest. Evelyn's stiff posture endured, her tight smile holding its line even under Clara's scrutiny. But it was the infant, always the infant, that commanded her attention, that unnatural gaze. And at its throat, the impossibly clear locket. Clara turned her eyes back to the cover before her. The Private Journal of Evelyn Rose Blackwood, 1913. The date itself gripped her, establishing a presence before memory. This was not hearsay, not generational retelling, distorted by time. This was testimony. Her thumb traced the leather's cracked seals, tasting apprehension through touch. Finally, she opened it. The handwriting was neat, at first elegant Edwardian script that pressed faithfully across each line. The date, April 17th, 1913. The child came to us today. Margaret delivered her just after midnight. Such a tiny thing, though her eyes, my God, her eyes hold a gravity I have never seen in an infant. Henry insists upon the name Lillian, after his mother. I am to present her as mine, though the deceit weighs heavy on my conscience. Yet what choice do we have? Margaret's condition would shame us all, were it known, and the circumstances of that conception, unspeakable. And so I shall hold this child before our friends, our neighbors, as though she were born of me. God, forgive us. Clara's breath stilled. Evelyn's words not only confirmed the existence of the child, but admitted the lethal false motherhood covering the scandal of Margaret's disgrace. Scandal was common enough in 1913, but this locket, she skimmed forward. April 20th. Already the nurse remarks on Lillian's eyes. They do not drift as other babies. They fix too much, too strong. I feel myself undone beneath that stare, as if judged before I have spoken. The locket we leave upon her, Margaret's parting gift. I know not whence it came. She pressed it into my palm before being led away, whispering only that it must never be removed. Clara sat back hard on the bed frame behind her. The journal sagged against her lap. Margaret, her great-great-grandmother's sister, had disappeared from all family records. Sanitarium, the earlier entry had said. Switzerland, disposal disguised as care. And she had left the locket, burdening the child with it, as if it were inheritance itself. She turned pages slowly, April shifting into May. The script began to falter, still elegant, but burdened by tremors. May 3rd, the infant screams each sunset, ceasing only long into the night. No rocking steadies her. Not song, nor milk, nor touch. She quiets at last, only as the clocks strike 3, and strangely each timepiece in the nursery halts as she sleeps. Henry insists it is coincidence. I am not convinced. The nurse has grown fearful. Clara's chest tightened. She could almost hear it, the unendurably shrill cry that rose with the evening sun, and then clocks arrested mid-second, time itself bending to the rhythms of an infant. She read on. May 10th, the nurse swears the rocking horse moves, of its own accord. I have observed no such motion. Yet this morning the horse was found across the room, toppled, its position unexplained. The maid, Winifred, refuses to enter unless accompanied. My household crumbles before whispers and shadows. May 15th. Margaret sends letters from abroad. She writes of dreams, of Lillian speaking though thousands of miles separate them. She begs to know whether the locket remains bound as it must. I confess I have attempted to open it. The clasp does not yield. I pressed it with a scissors. The steel shattered in hand, slicing deep. 7 stitches required. I have not told Henry. He would demand I discard the talisman, but I know it cannot be discarded. Its chain seems fused into the very flesh of the child. The entry's words crawled beneath Clara's skin. A metallic taste rose in her throat. She set the journal down, staring again at the portrait propped resolutely on the cedar chest. In the nursery image, faint on crude shelves. She had admired toys before, but now, reading Evelyn's descriptions, something in them unsettled the porcelain doll with its stiff white face, the bear slumped in corner shadows. They seemed more like witnesses than playmates, and through the glass of the frame, the locket glinted with recursive menace. Clara swallowed dryly and picked up the journal again. Mid-May, Mrs. Winters, the nurse, has gone. This morning she lifted her crucifix and found it twisted, mangled between her fingers. She left her notice before breakfast, stammering prayers as she fled. Henry withdraws to his club, unready to confront our plight. I remain alone. Alone with the child. Alone with her eyes watching me even as she sleeps. May 21st. Margaret's letter. Dreams again. She describes horrors I barely compel myself to write, her body stiffening in sleep. Her dream breath speaking voices not her own. She swore. Lillian commands her across distance. Margaret presses further. The locket never under any circumstance to leave her flesh. It is her protection, they say. But protect from whom? From what? Margaret's words reek of guilt. She will not confess the father. Was he no father at all? Clara closed the journal. Her chest caved with dread. The details gathered weight not of metaphor, but of fact. The uncanny child. The talismanic locket. The infant's cries entwined with broken clocks and distant dreams. And Evelyn was alone, in the narrow quiet of the great chamber. Clara found herself whispering perhaps to Evelyn, perhaps to the infant long gone. What did you bring into this house? The silence did not reply, but she did not feel alone. She placed the journal down and rubbed her eyes, her pulse quick. The house creaked faintly as it settled. In the corner, she glanced back to the portrait. The infant's eyes seemed to glint sharper. Clara shook her head. Paranoia. Shadows. But still her phone buzzed faintly in her pocket, jolting her. She pulled it out, a text alert. Unknown number, but something in her stomach cramped when she saw the username, Blackwell Legacy. The message was simple. Do not remove the locket. Speak of what you've found. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She stared at the portrait, then the journal. The house seemed to lean closer, waiting. The message still flickered across her phone's cracked screen, its sharp white glow cutting the gloom of the chamber. Do not remove the locket. Speak of what you found. Clara's hand tightened around the device until her knuckles whitened. The number was unknown, unlisted, yet the signature Blackwell legacy rang with eerie resonance, as though anticipating her discovery within the cedar chest, as though watching from some unseen vantage. "Who are you?" she whispered, though she did not type the words. Her eyes drifted unwillingly back, toward the raised oval portrait propped on the trunk. Lillian Margaret's child? Evelyn's ward stared still with unnerving clarity through the grain of sepia, the locket pinned against her breast as if mocking Clara's inability to escape it. At last, Clara forced herself to return her attention to the journal. The red leather pulsed almost warmly in her palm. Her fingers traced anew the elegant script inside. The entries of late May had grown shakier, words slanted, spacing inconsistent, ink blotched by trembling hand. May 25, 1913. Sleep eludes me. The child wails each dusk, but no longer as she did before. It is not merely cries of hunger or discomfort. The sound contains tones I scarce can write, rhythms unmatched by any lullaby, like a call in some hidden tongue. The nursery chills each evening, even as spring warmth presses the rest of the house. A frost clings to window panes, though no wind stirs outside. Toys alter in silence. Soldiers assembled, though I have scattered them. Dolls' heads turned toward doorways where I stand. Last night, at 3 precisely, I swear I heard whispering in Margaret's voice, though she lies far away. I entered the nursery. Silence. Yet Lillian gazed up, and upon her lips crept the faintest curve, a smile I wish to God never to see again. Clara's stomach turned. She could almost hear the whispers Evelyn described, like drafts sliding through the walls. She read on compulsively. May 30th, 1913. It is unbearable. Henry mocks my fears, telling me the nursemaids are hysterical, and that mothers before me have known such sleepless nights. But Mrs. Winter and Mrs. Carter both left in tears, clutching crucifixes that bent in the child's presence. I cannot deny what my eyes have witnessed: flames guttering blue in still air, crucifixes splintered, a singed outline upon the floor beneath her cradle, as though some heat rose from within. I sought to pry loose the locket once more. Useless. Its clasp will not yield. The child claws when I approach it, her infant nails scoring flesh as though by design. Margaret's words, Econover, remove it. But if not removed, then how to be rid of what seeps from it? Clara shuddered. She clutched the leather tighter, aware of how her heartbeat had become a physical pressure in her ears. She read on hastily, fearing what came next, yet hungered for confirmation that she was not imagining the dread pricking at every corner of the chamber. June 3rd, 1913. This morning, desperation overcame shame. I consulted a man, not of conventional practice, but recommended by Henry's colleague, Dr. Samuel Blackwell, a physician of sorts. Though his arts extend into esoterica, his name hummed with familiarity even as he stepped through the door. He has studied symbologies, bindings, theologies older than reason. When I unveiled the locket, his composure faltered. He insisted I send staff from the room before he spoke about his findings. And then he confessed, the symbol etched upon its surface is no ornament but a sigil. A binding circle reversed, locked about with interlacing seals. He believes it was forged not for adornment, but for a pact. He calls it a containment, yet not of benevolent spirits. No, what binds is ancient, what enfolds is hungry. He fears Margaret consorted with those versed in arts unholy. Perhaps in her desperation to shield her child from her violator, she placed the infant instead in sanctuary of some older hunger. The locket is a cage and an invitation both. He warns bindings inevitably weaken. He could not speak aloud what follows when such chains fail. Clara's throat constricted. The name Blackwell resonated, cold and close, clanging against the unknown sender on her phone minutes earlier. Her pulse quickened, and she swiped the screen awake with trembling fingers, daring this time to type a reply. "Who are you?" You knew about the locket. The ellipses blinked quickly, as though the stranger was already waiting. My great-grandfather was Dr. Samuel Blackwell. He aided Evelyn. The records survive in my family. The binding was to last a century. If the locket has surfaced again, the chain has failed. Do not underestimate what is waking. Clara's vision narrowed. Somewhere, the house creaked a groan. Along its beams, she forced breath back into her lungs. She lifted her eyes to the portrait. The toys arrayed in the nursery appeared bent slightly differently in this light. She blinked. No Shirley imagination. She turned back to the journal. June 10th. The doctor promises assistance, but insists I may not act alone. He will bring an associate, an old woman versed in traditions older still, who alone can attempt reinforcement. I sense in his tone reluctance, but also fear. He insists I not call upon Henry or servants, that secrecy is essential. It is the child or the household, he said. I scarce dare consider which I wish preserved more. Clara set the journal down, resting her forehead against her palm. The air felt thinner, her pulse restless. The phone buzzed again. Listen, each manifestation you describe in the journal is documented in our records. Your ancestor attempted reinforcement with an ally called Madame Sibylla. They contained it, not cured it. That photo you found was commemorative, a memory of false calm. Clara rubbed her forehead, whispering aloud, commemorative, or a warning. She stared again at Evelyn in the portrait, the tight line of her mouth, her jaw taut as if clenched against screams. The child's eyes remained fixed, the locket blazing even in monochrome. The journal pages fluttered beneath Clara's hands like fragile wings. The deeper she descended into Evelyn's words, the darker the air around her seemed to thicken. She skimmed the earlier June entries, again references to Dr. Samuel Blackwell's reluctant guidance, his warning of failing bindings, his insistence she not confide in Henry or servants. Then, on June 20th, a new hand took center stage. June 20th, 1913, Dr. Blackwell arrived again this morning, but not alone. He brought to our steps an old woman who needed no introduction, though I had never seen her before. She named herself Sibylla. Her presence chilled me deeper than the phenomena in the nursery. She did not ask to be led upstairs. She walked directly toward the child's room, fell to her knees upon entering, and wept aloud as though she had stepped into a crypt filled with bodies. She called the air poisoned with hunger. Sibylla confirmed the doctor's diagnosis of the locket. Containment, yes, but temporary. She insisted the binding could be reinforced, but only under precise conditions, the dark of the moon. Until then, gathering herbs, salts, metals, iron to bar, and salt to seal, she repeated, shaking her withered index finger at me. The ritual would stain the walls themselves with its smoke. God forgive me, I agreed. Clara's eyes lingered on the old ink blotches, her lips pursed. It was fascinating, and an archivist's mind, a primary testimony describing ritual magic prepared, as though it were a prescription. But the academic portion of her brain struggled against something deeper, unease, that this was not metaphor, not allegory. This was survival. A soft squeak broke the silence. Clara froze, staring toward the portrait. The nursery scene remained fixed, Evelyn rigid, and the baby perched upright. But on the shelf behind them, among the toys she'd catalogued bare, dolls, drum, she swore. The drumstick had shifted. No, she murmured aloud, too loud in the still chamber. But when she narrowed her eyes, the drumstick indeed rested against a different angle than it had earlier that day. Her breath shallowed. She turned back quickly to the journal, as if words were refuge. June 27, 1913. Preparation consumes my days. Sibylla demands roots I have never heard named, powders that burn my fingers with rash. I have scoured chemists' shops and bribed an apothecary in Whitechapel for herbs whose very smell unmoors reason. She pressed upon me the creation of a garment for Lillian, A small gown to be soaked in waters, baptized and mixed with these burned powders. She muttered prayers, not in Latin, nor Greek, nor any tongue I know yet. The sound of them clung to the walls. Last night, I caught Lillian listening. Her eyes followed words not audible, and she stretched toward the corner of the nursery where no one stood, cooing in voices that were not infantile. I feel myself fraying. Clara rubbed her temples. An ache bloomed there. She exhaled, slow and controlled, though her eyes kept darting to the portrait's edge, where the drum sat. Still, still. Though she no longer trusted stillness at all, she flipped through more entries, marked July. Evelyn's penmanship grew. Unstable ink, skipping strokes jagged. July 3rd, 1913. The time nears. Sibylla scribbles lists upon parchment, greater than scribes of prayer. Dr. Blackwell is reluctant. Claims he sees remnants of orders he dare not name, but he stays. His hands shaking only out of shame. He has no better counsel to offer. The child does not sleep as children should. Her eyes watch the door in waiting. Her gums bleed without reason, yet she bites the air as though gnawing invisible bones. The nursery reeks carrion odor, rising sweet, then bitter. Servants beg dismissal. Henry attends none of it. It is I alone, always alone. At this, Clara paused, shuddering. She pressed the back of her hand against her mouth. She had catalogued accounts of haunting before, even read transcripts of poltergeist testimonies. But this recorded long before pulp entertainments bore sincerity. A woman alone, improvising faith against something vast. Her phone buzzed on the cedar. Startled, she picked it up. Blackwell legacy again. Do these words match what I know? You read now? My records confirm Sibylla's ritual. It bound the entity, but did not kill it. Your portrait was its commemoration. Clara typed, fingers clumsy. How do you know what page I just saw? The answer was swift. Because I too hold his journals. Samuel Blackwell burned the duplicates of Sibylla's incantations, but left notes. I inherited the rest. We have both halves of one history. Clara shut her eyes tightly. She felt the weight of their entanglement deep in her chest. She turned back to Evelyn's journal. July 12th. Sibylla commands silence of all tongues but hers. Henry storms like a child. I have sent him away. He mocks us all, though he dare not set foot in the nursery. Lillian utters sounds too fine, too deliberate. Her lips frame syllables that echo Sibylla's mutterings perfectly. The old woman beams with confirmation. My heart breaks for the child supposedly mine. Was she tainted before birth, conceived through violation, or made such after? I cannot answer. The locket permits no removal and burns to touch. Its glow strengthens. Its pulse is felt upon my very skin now. Clara's hands trembled. Her vision drifted toward the actual portrait. She leaned forward. Was it? No, but yes. Just beneath sepia tone, faint across the photograph's surface, she thought she saw a dim outline around the locket. Not light, reflecting from her lamp, but radiance of its own. Her stomach lurched. She swore, her breath shaking. No, no. She thudded the journal shut and grabbed her phone. Her hands trembled as she typed. It's glowing. The portrait. The locket here. Now it's glowing. Blackwell legacy answered faster than heartbeat. Contain it. Salt, if you have it. Do not meet its eyes if the portrait moves. Above? I'll don't look away if it does. Clara dropped the phone on the duvet and spun around again toward the frame. The oval portrait sat inert. Evelyn remained rigid, the infant perched, yet her nerves screamed. Around the child's chest clearer than before, the pendant's depth shimmered, as though lifting, becoming almost a separate object from paper. The cedar chest creaked sharply. Clara yelped. Her eyes darted back to the journal, laying abandoned on her lap. She forced herself to open it once more. Words from late July shook across the pages. Sibylla says the dark moon is near. Preparations are nearly complete. She requires blood and mine, not the child's. She claims this will weld the symmetry. I tremble, yet better my blood than hers. She daubs sigils and sacred mixtures upon walls. The house stinks of iron and ash. I sleep no longer. My dreams pulse red. My body grows old before its years. My hands do not look at me. Clara pressed a palm over her mouth. Her other hand gripped the frame desperately. The portrait shifted. Not the entire shine, but the rocking horse in the background leaned slightly forward, captured at a new angle, as though mid-swing. Clara could no longer exhale. The words on the journal page were thick with desperation, blotches of ink bleeding where Evelyn's quill hand had faltered. Clara traced them with her eyes, reading hungrily, though part of her screamed to stop. August 7th, 1913, the dark moon came. I begged God for mercy, but no reprieve was given. They arrived at midnight. Dr. Blackwell, in solemn silence, Sibyl, draped in shawls smelling of strange resins and burnt oils. They brought with them a case whose contents I dared not examine. Implements formed of bone and brass, powders luminous like crushed stone, vessels of glass that rattled with things alive inside. I pretended blindness, though my soul shuddered at every glimpse. Evelyn's words faltered here. Ink gouged into paper, the nightmare of recording while terror still rang in the bones. Lillian was placed at the circle's center, cooing curiously, though she had cried all day prior. We unfastened no cloth. The locket remained impenetrable, as ever. Sibylla drew upon the floor with iron filings and salt, curving sigils into patterns that spun and doubled upon themselves until my eyes watered. She muttered verses in a tongue unfamiliar, though Blackwell answered at intervals, half in Latin, half in something older. The child watched all proceedings, never once blinking. Clara felt her stomach twist. Her lamplight guttered slightly, though the air around her had not moved. She swallowed. They pricked my wrist and let my blood fall upon the seal. The drop hissed like coal in water. Sibylla clapped her hands thrice, and the candles dimmed, though their flames burned strong. I saw shadows rise in corners, figures, or smoke. I dare not claim either. Yet one leaned close to me and whispered in Margaret's voice. I never left her. The locket glowed a heat even I felt, though feet away. Its pentagram burned outward, like a star unfettered. Sibylla cried, aloud words I cannot repeat, as if my very throat closed to prevent utterance. The child stared up at her, and for the first time since her arrival, she smiled. A smile unchildlike, knowing, cruel, and beautiful. Then it ended. The nursery cleared. The air lifted. The smell of rot evaporated. The silence, no longer, pressed but loosened. Blackwell sank to his knees, trembling relief. Sibylla collapsed beside the cradle, whispering the words, reinforced, not cured. She warned the ritual will hold only years, decades perhaps, but never eternity. Only vigilance may preserve us. Clara snapped the book shut, her entire body clammy. Her gaze dragged inexorably toward the portrait resting against the cedar chest. Evelyn's tense smile, the infantilian, with her gleaming locket. No longer screaming, but staring, she whispered aloud, almost involuntarily. This portrait, this is that commemoration. Her phone buzzed violently, nearly thrown from the bed, at the force of her startled hand. She snatched it up. Blackwell legacy. Yes, the portrait itself was the record. A family relic, taken at Evelyn's insistence after Sibylla's ritual. Proof to herself that calm had returned. Do you see her smile now for what it is? Clara's throat closed. She turned, staring again at the sepia image. Evelyn's lips tight, rigid, unrelaxed. Not peace, vigilance. A mother who had bartered blood to preserve existence in walls rotting around her. Her gaze slipped to the shelf of toys. Her breath hitched. The drum, which she had sworn earlier had shifted positions, now lay toppled on its side. Clara rose sharply to her feet, her chair scraping the uneven floor. She stared, blinking hard, willing the illusion to vanish. But no, there it was. Where before the drum perched upright in balance, now it lay sprawling, sticks cast wide. Her phone chimed again, careful. Each reinforcement ritual bound the entity into multiple conduits, not only the locket, but any image taken of it. The portrait is not just a photograph, it is a doorway. Did you notice changes yet? Clara typed quickly, hands slick with sweat. Yes, the toys. They move. Then, the entity senses you. It begins as mimicry, then infestation. Do not break gaze. Do not let it catch you between blinks. Salt, always. Clara's eyes watered. She refused to close them. She whispered hoarsely, her throat raw. God help me. She forced herself back to Evelyn's journal, as though words bound her sanity. August 10th, 1913, 3 days of blessed silence. No cries, no shattered crucifixes. My house breathes peace. By Christ's wounds, I allow myself rest. Henry has retreated no more. He sleeps again. Perhaps we succeeded. August 12th, I have taken the child to a photographer. Henry refuses, but I insisted. If my torment was to cease, let there be record of its ending. A portrait to sanctify our survival. To lie if not to God, then to myself, that we are whole. Yet even as the shutter opened, I saw in my periphery the shadow of Sibylla, mouthing cautions. Still I demanded it. If calm exists, let me clutch it in my hands. The next page was smeared, ink dragged by tears fallen decades before. Clara fought to breathe. She rose from the bed, pacing in tight circles, yet her eyes never strayed fully from the portrait itself. Her historian's mind pieced the puzzle. The ritual succeeded temporarily. Evelyn, desperate for proof of restoration, demanded the portrait the very image Clara now held more than a century later. A photograph not merely art, but tethered. And now, it shifted. She gasped. The child's locket not glowing now, but pulsing. The faint shimmer beneath sepia had intensified, each pulse in rhythm with her own heartbeat. She stumbled backward, knocking her lamp. The room lunged into deeper shadow. Her phone chimed thrice in succession. Stay with it. Eyes on. It salt your thresholds. And remember, what it shows you is never all. The portrait seemed to breathe. Clara's mouth opened on a scream. She did not let free. The journal's pages between August and September carried a different hand. As though Evelyn had tried to steady herself, convinced herself, Clara turned them carefully, noting each line, each fading blot. August 15th, 1913, it has been near a week since the rite, and I confess I begin to dream again without waking in sweat. The child no longer cries in darkness. She sleeps through, her chest even, though the locket remains warm to the touch. Sibylla claimed the rite would lift heaviness of air. I had not dared believe until I walked the nursery barefoot and felt warmth return to my toes. Let me clutch this reprieve, even if fragile, even if false. Clara shut her lips tightly as her eyes scanned on. She knew what Evelyn longed for, a moment of calm, confirmation that the horrors had yielded to human effort. But the dread in the words fragile, false crackled like old smoke still smoldering. August 21st, 1913, I spend hours staring at her face, desperate to see nothing unnatural, to believe she is no more than any infant. She coos now, not wails. She smiles when the morning light falls across her cradle. Yet when she gazes upon the locket, her pupils dilate as though she sees more than I can. Innocence dwell in such knowledge. I pray it may. But I know Sibylla's prophecy, reinforced, not cured. Clara hummed nervously in her throat. The phrase beat against her skull, reinforced, not cured. The portrait against the cedar chest pulsed faintly again. She glanced, quickly. Evelyn sat stiff as ever. But Clara knew now, with the certainty of archives turned inside out, that smile was not triumph. It was endurance. She turned another page. September 1st, 1913, Henry speaks less with me. He will not share meat at the dining room, nor wine at table. He says the house depresses, though I know it is she, Lillian, who depresses him, though he dare not speak it aloud. Already staff desert us. The maid found her rosary beads scattered in ash this morning and fled without notice. I walk the halls without company, alone, but never truly alone. Her eyes lingered on that last line. Clara pressed her palm to the paper as though to catch Evelyn's shaking hand. Across the century dot the next page sagged slightly from heavy ink blotting. September 12, 1913, Lillian speaks. I scarce dare mark it here, yet how may I not? An infant of months utters not mere syllables but words. Strange words, guttural and rolling, that break my mind to decipher. Sibylla scrawled them down and claims them fragments of language older than Latin, fragments of rites older than the cross. Samuel Blackwell asked me not to repeat them aloud. For once, I outwardly obey. Yet though mortal tongues falter when she utters them, shadows blink. Clara exhaled through her nose, sharp and shallow. She lowered the journal into her lap and stared again at the portrait. The carved rocking horse, the drum, the dolls, and then she heard it, from nowhere, from everywhere, a faint rattle, a sound just like porcelain clinking lightly against wood. Her ears strained. The house was still, and yet it had come from the wall where the portrait rested. Her throat dried, but she dared not stop reading. Retreat was impossible. She lifted the journal again. October 3rd, 1913, it begins anew. As I feared, as Sibylla warned, the reinforcements weaken like mortars beneath rain. I noticed it 3 nights past. The locket glowed beneath her gown without light nearby. Last night, I heard her giggle mid-sleep though. When I entered, she was alone in crib. The rocking horse lay across the boards, though I swear it had not been touched. I telegraphed Blackwell. His return delayed. Sibylla, I cannot reach. The house yearns again with a hum beneath floors, and I alone. The words splayed messily, Evelyn's once careful script fraying into jagged rush. Clara's chest tightened. She gazed up. The portrait's shelf of toys, they were 7 now, weren't they? Her throat constricted. She counted each. Teddy bear, 3 dolls, train, drum, Andisa, cloth rabbit. She whispered, "No, you weren't there before." The faint porcelain clatter again. A tinkle like teeth against glass. Her phone buzzed with painful violence against a cedar. She slapped it into her hand, finger fumbling to unlock. Blackwell legacy. Count them. Tell me how many toys in portrait now. Hazardously, she peered toward the photograph again, her chest fluttering. Her whisper rose hoarse. 7. There. Should be 6. It manifests additions. The process has begun. Her stomach plunged cold. She closed her eyes, but forced them open again. Staving sleep, refusing to let the portrait shift unseen. The journal trembled in her hand. She brought the next entry upright, forcing her voiceless mind to anchor in text. October 10th, 1913, Henry drinks. I cannot fault him. The house shifts in nightly torments. On Tuesday, the sound of insects swarmed within walls, though none were seen. Wednesday, whispers of children recited some rhyme unknown to me. Thursday, silence followed by shrills of laughter from the nursery, though no mouth moved when I entered. Lillian thrives amidst this. She grows roses in her cheeks, her appetite voracious. She follows my steps with eyes laden with understanding beyond us both. The locket now pulses like a second heart. Her flesh is a husk. Something inside watches, waiting. Clara dropped her forehead into her palm, bile crowding her throat. The lamp's light flickered again, not guttering, but pulsing, in rhythm with the pendant and the photograph. The journal's words blurred and refocused. beneath her stinging eyes. October 15th, 1913 telegram from Switzerland. Margaret is dead. They claim she hanged herself with her sheets, her final weeks filled with rants cries that she must free the child. They did not bury note nor word. I alone read her meaning. She felt the bond stretched across leagues. Her sin has ended her, yet the fruit Lillian remains, cursed or chosen. Clara slammed the journal shut, hands trembling hard. A noise followed instantly. Not porcelain, not house-settling, laughter, clear, small, childlike, issuing not from her memory, not from imagination, but from the wall, where the oval portrait pressed against cedar. Clara staggered back, clutching journal to her chest, whispering again, "No, please, no." Her phone's screen buzzed anew. Do not run. Running seals the pact. Face it. And above all, watch the locket. She dared raise her eyes. Inside the portrait, the pendant glowed brilliantly now. Not sepia, not photographic. An actual red-golden pulse that shifted the shadows on her bedroom walls, and all the toys on the shelf were smiling. Clara sat rigid, back pressed against the cold wall, the red leather journal trembling in her grip. The laughter had faded from the portrait, but not her memory. Its echo still rang in the hollow of her chest. She forced herself to open the book again, terrified but fixed in purpose. The handwriting inside had shifted, no longer calm or elegant, but frantic. Jagged strokes slanted forward, as though Evelyn had scrawled with quill, clutched tightly in a trembling hand. October 21st, 1913. I cannot rest. The entity prowls, no longer in whispers. Last night, as I sat beside the cradle and prayed, a form bled from the shadows. A mist, blacker than night, yet thin as breath, drew eyes like fractured stars. It spoke in Margaret's voice, then changed, syllables writhing like worms, sounding at once familiar and alien. It told me the locket was a prison, not for protection, but for entrapment, that I, in binding, had chained its body, yet freed its tongue. It told me Lillian is not a daughter, not a child, but a vessel. My soul recoils, yet how deny when her mouth today formed full phrases. She greeted me with words not given to her age. Her eyes flash golden now. God forgive what we have wrought. Clara swallowed hard. She felt tears sting against her eyes but refused to wipe them. The room around her darkened oppressively, as though Evelyn's words had thickened her present air. She read on. October 24th, Henry is gone. Last eve he threatened to flee with coin and courage neither present. He begged I leave her, leave. The husk cribbed upstairs. 2 housemaids are heaven. I called him coward. He stormed into night with Felice. I pray he never returns, for fear has undone him. The entity grows bold. The locket now burns when brushed. The sigil etched upon it flickers, shifting as though alive, rearranging its form when glimpsed from corner sight. Lillian's tongue utters languishes no book teaches. I moved the cradle into my room. I dare not let her lie beyond my reach. Clara's pulse throbbed. She grasped the book tighter, her other hand reaching instinctively toward the cedar chest for stability. Her fingers brushed against something she hadn't felt before, a soft resistance wedged deep at its corner. Curious, she pulled, and an object slid free with a shriek of fabric against wood. A velvet pouch, black. Its drawstring cracked, the texture rough with years. It was small, the size of her palm, but dread radiated from it, like warmth from an ember. Her breath caught. She gripped it, but did not loosen the string. The journal burned in her lap, begging not to be shut. She turned another page. October 31st. All Hallows Eve. The words were scrawled vertically down margins, frantic, as though Evelyn's hand had given up coherence. The air today split with storm. The bells rang discord in my ears, while no church tolled. The entity paces the rooms unseen, but wakeful. I sent it, Orchids rotted, lilies spoiled, flowers left too long in water. At dawn, Sibylla's note arrived. 4 words only: destroy the locket before midnight. But how? I have bashed it on stone, shattered instruments of iron against it. Hammer splintered, knife bent. Fire glowed cold against its shell. Acid bubbled, retreated. The glass vials empty with no effect. It is near midnight. Lillian stares without pause. The locket hums loud as any heartbeat, synchron to no man's pulse but its own. Sibylla's letter rests beside me, damning me. I have not the strength, nor tool, nor faith. If these words remain, know this: I tried. The ink ended, letters breaking off into scratches, the nib scoring the page. Evelyn's account ceased here. Clara sat very still. The silence of the room was suffocating, made heavy by the absence of continuation. Her fingers tightened around the velvet pouch. She whispered aloud, voice cracking, "Is it in here?" Her phone buzzed on the cedar chest, as if in answer. Blackwell Legacy. Yes, the pouch. We feared it lost. Do not open. Inside is the true object. Even the image in it. The portrait gained its hunger from it. That pouch is older than the house. Evelyn removed pages to hide the counterbinding. They may linger with it. Clara stared at the pouch. Its weight was negligible and yet crushing. She set it down carefully, trembling, and then footsteps. She froze, blood rushing in her ears. Yes, clear, deliberate. Soft footsteps crossing the upstairs hall outside the chamber door. Clara's eyes widened. Her hand flicked to the lamp switch, but before she moved it, she knew the light was no ally now. Her gaze darted back to the portrait. The infant in sepia, the child Evelyn called Lillian, seemed different. Clara's sight strained. Forced, no, not seemed. Was. The mouth had opened, not to cry, but to smile, wide, too wide. Ink teeth glimmered behind lips that had not previously parted, and in the pouch in Clara's lap, the faintest vibration began. The velvet pouch lay before Clara on the cedar lid, silent yet tremoring faintly, as though the pulse of something unseen beat within its lining. She had pushed it away twice, only to find her gaze instantly drawn back, pupils chained to its black folds. "Don't," she whispered hoarsely to herself, fingers clenching the quilt on the bed. "Don't open it." The phone buzzed, vibrating across a stack of her great-grandmother's letters. With shaking hands, she lifted it. Blackwell Legacy. It calls to you, doesn't it? That is its way. Be cautious. The locket and the pages, hidden beside it, are not inert. They know their heirs. Clara's breath came shallow. She typed quickly. Why me? Why not my mother, or hers before her? The reply was immediate. Because you were the one to break the chest. The pact waits for blood at threshold moments. It watches who unearths it. Evelyn fed it herself to hold the entity back. Now you are the point of symmetry. The circle always closes. Her stomach plunged, cold and heavy. Symmetry, the word whispered again in her brain, echoing with Sibylla's chant. Binding triangles, blood points. The pouch seemed to twitch faintly again, almost like muscle beneath cloth. No, Clara said aloud, standing sharply, though her legs felt leaden. Not me. This ends here. And yet she could not stop herself. She reached for the pouch. Her fingertips brushed velvet rough with dust. She froze, drawing breath slow and controlled. She forced her thumb against the brittle knot of string. It resisted, then crumbled, falling slack. The opening sagged. A stale breath exhaled from within. A draft of lilies gone soft with putrefaction. Inside, glimmered gold. The locket dot, not flat as in photograph, but raised, tangible, heavy, oval-surfaced, its forbidden pentagram etched with unsettling depth. But more staggering than its presence were the folded scraps of paper pressed tight against it. Clara's throat locked. She lifted the journal pages free first, careful not to touch the metal. They were slighter than she imagined, fragile as mothwing, ink-blotted but legible. Her lamp flickered restlessly at their unfurling. The handwriting was Evelyn's, but rougher, half ragged. November 1st, 1913. It is past midnight. Sibylla fled before the clock. Blackwell did not come. Alone at the instant, and the entity showed itself whole. It poured from crib like smoke and shadow, blossoming above like wings from darkness. It took her face Margaret's then, Lillian's then, eyes only. It spoke with voices too many to describe. I could not strike the locket down. I tried hammer, axe. It yielded nothing. In frenzy, I pressed the blood of my palm upon the sigil. It flared, and then silence. The ink blurred, smudged, as though by tears that had fallen even before fully drying. It vanished. Not gone, but pulled into me. I feel it now, threaded in veins, beating in time with the child's breath. I am not its host, but its anchor. The triangle complete. The sigil, the vessel, the mother. It lies bound not just to her, but to me. My marrow sings with its whisper. I age as I write. My face betrays years unjust. I cannot record more, ungodly tired. But know this, one of my blood will hold it again. When the locket stirs, so must you. God, forgive me. God, forgive you. Clara's hands shook so violently the paper nearly crumpled. She forced them flat to the bed, pressing it down. Her skin crawled. She reached for the phone with frantic urgency. Typed, I found missing pages. She says she bound it into herself. Her bloodline said it will return, that it demands me. 3 dots. Then yes, I feared this. Our families entwined it. Blackwood, blood bound it. Blackwell knowledge tried to contain it. It cannot break without both. Your great-grandmother became half of the cage. That is why you feel it. That is why you hear it. Clara froze, because yes, she did hear it. Her name, faint as ghost breath, from the portrait's wall, from the pouch on the bed, Clarar. She dropped to her knees, pressing fists against ears, yet the voice bloomed within skullbone. Her phone buzzed. A stark rupture through silence. Do not surrender. That is what it demands. Willing opening. It cannot manifest without consent. Your hesitation is the only thing holding it. Clara reeled upward, stumbling, her gaze catching the portrait. The child's mouth was wider now, green and natural tooth rows merging into shadow itself. The toys on the shelf were all staring forward. All of them. Even the bear, their glass eyes, glinting as though wet. Her knees gave, collapsing back against the cedar. The pouch slid forward, spilling the locket into faint lamplight, and in naked air, it pulsed audible, a heartbeat against fabric. Clara grabbed her phone with both hands, texted in her panic. What happens if it opens fully, if I consent? The reply took long seconds. Then it will become you. That smile in the photograph will not remain behind glass. It will widen in your flesh. Clara sobbed aloud, angry, terrified. Her eyes snapped back up at the infant's likeness, and the voice whispered again, clearer now, from both portrait and pouch, in unholy chorus. We remember you, Clara. Blood called us. Blood binds us. Open your heart, and we shall open ours. The lamp sputtered out entirely. Darkness swallowed, except the locket shone lit from within. The locket's glow lit the chamber like a coal, warm yet corrupt, casting warped shadows of Clara's body against the faded wallpaper. Her breath came shallow through clenched teeth. The portrait, half lost in darkness, revealed only the eyes of the photographed child, glittering with reflected firelight. Wide, unrelenting, hungry. Clara forced herself to move, not away, but toward her satchel. She grabbed the small container of salt she had carried up instinctively earlier. a trickle of practicality cutting through horror. She poured a line around the cedar chest, circling herself, the pouch, and the book in desperate barrier. The grains fell uneven but white, softly gleaming in the locket's unnatural light. For a moment, the air eased. Her heartbeat slowed by one notch, then came the giggle. Not from her memory, not imagination. From the portrait, Clara spun. The photograph had changed yet again. The toys behind Evelyn and the infant Lillian were no longer resting on shelves. They were clustered near the edges of the frame, as if pressing forward, eager to escape their painted confinement. And worse, the baby's hand, once posed limp across Evelyn's gown, now pressed palm flat against the inside of the glass. The surface bulged faintly, bulged outward as if thin membrane, not photograph. No, Clara hissed. She threw the salt canister forward, casting another splash across the portrait's frame. The air cracked, sharp as whipped cord, and for an instant, the glass pulsed inward again, retreating. Her phone buzzed wild. She clawed it up. Blackwell Legacy. Contain it more salt. Iron filings. Use tools. The entity is testing the barrier. Portrait is conduit. Clara shoved the phone aside and fished in her archivist's kit. Her hand closed on a pair of iron tweezers used for lifting plates. She dropped them onto the cedar chest, watching the locket's light sputter faintly in resistance. She flipped through the lost pages again, desperate for more of Evelyn's final words. November 2nd, 1913, it fades, not wholly banished, but quieter. The locket does not burn as before. Yet I feel it, whispering in marrow, laughing when I weep. Sibylla lied, nothing can be destroyed, only woven anew. The pattern requires 3 points: the sigil, the locket, the vessel, the child, and the blood willing to bind. I have bound myself to complete the circuit. For now, the cage holds. But already I age before mirror. Already the entity reshapes my eyes. Whoever finds this, no, you must complete the triangle again, or leave the world cracked open. Symmetry, or ruin. Clara's lips parted in dread. Her great-grandmother had become 1 point, and now, through her bloodline, she was another. Symmetry or ruin, she whispered aloud, her throat raw. The photograph jolted then, emitting a strange, sharp cry. The glass shimmered, and the baby's palm pressed harder, fingers curling, straining outward through 2 dimensions. No, Clara shouted. She grabbed the tweezers, their metal cold and real, and slammed them onto the pouch where the locket lay exposed. Sparks flared. The glow faltered with a faint hiss, scent of iron on burning hair. She heaved breath after breath, heart pounding. From the portrait, the toys rattled, a tiny wooden train sliding an inch forward against glass. A doll's head twisting, watching her directly though unmoving before. Her phone chimed again. You weaken it. Iron wounds projection. Salt blocks its spread. Keep circle strong. I am coming. Hold 3 hours longer. 3 hours, she wanted to scream. Instead she crouched low, feeding another line of salt in front of the portrait. Her hand trembled so violently the trail broke in places. She patched it, muttering incoherently for strength. The laughter came again, her name this time, urgent, elongated in a child's sing-song tone. Claria, come play. Her jaw clenched. No. She slammed the journal pages shut. She refused to give her voice. But then footsteps, not within the portrait, not muffled as hallucination, from the house. Real, measured, child's steps. Bare, slow, soft against the hallway carpet, outside the door. Her head jerked up, her throat squeezed air only enough for a whisper. No one else is here. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Clara pressed back into the wall, every muscle locked. The handle of the chamber door rattled, once, gently, as though tested by a hand small and soft. Her salt circle shimmered faintly in the glow. Her knuckles whitened on the Tweezers. The door remained shut, but the entity was no longer only inside the portrait. It was in the house. The rattling of the brass doorknob stilled, but silence was no reprieve. Clara stood in her wavering salt circle, breath shallow to keep from sobbing, knuckles white on the tweezers that felt absurd against the magnitude of her terror. She dared whisper, "Who's there?" from the hallway. A reply, clear, childlike, but with timbre no child should own. Clara. The syllables, elongated, sweet as sugar. Undercut with iron rasp, the velvet pouch quivered again, where it sat on the cedar, the locket's light, strobing against the walls. The portrait flared in sympathetic pulse, the baby's palm pushing outward harder, its grin splitting wider than Evelyn's face beside it could ever allow. And then came the sound of bare feet. Soft stepped closer, stopped just behind the door, a thin pause, then knuckles, gentle knocks. 3 in count. Clara staggered back, muttering, "No, not real, not real." But her phone buzzed across the cedar chest. She lunged for it. Blackwell Legacy. It will wear her image to tempt you. Do not open the door. Hold your ground. Speak nothing you mean. She raised shaky fingers to type, but froze as a voice bloomed inside the chamber, not muffled through oak, but rolling out of the darkness at corner. And there it was. She saw her a child. No, a replica of perhaps 5 years, blurred in edges, white gown dragging too long across the boards, the face wrong, proportioned as if painted, the eyes luminous gold. Around its throat the locket hovered, not touching flesh. Spinning slow above certain her salt line wavered faintly, dust scattering as if unseen wind pressed inward. The figure smiled with sweetness stretched to cruelty. "You found us," it sang. "We waited for you." Clara clutched her phone as lifeline. Her throat ached to scream, but the entity didn't lunge. It strolled, in its childlike shuffle, stopping just short of the loose salt line. Toes brushed the barrier, hissing faint where grains sparked. It cocked its tilted head. "That will not save you. Not forever. Not against what is owed," Clara rasped, her voice surprising her. "I owe you nothing." The apparition chuckled. "Blood owes blood. Evelyn bound us in hers. Now you carry hers, don't you? We know the taste. We smell it, waking in your veins." Her breathing fractured into cold gasps. The entity spread its pale hands, childish and yet too long in finger. "You cannot cage us without joining us. That's the rule. That's the symmetry." Clara's eyes shot down to Evelyn's torn final notes, still spread across the quilt. 3-point sigil, vessel, blood. Symmetry or ruin. It was true. Evelyn herself had written it. The apparition crouched close, knees jutting wrong, like marionette hinges. "If you let us in, Clara, no more hiding under salt and darkness. We will give you what Evelyn only feared. Strength, knowledge, the pattern of all things. You will never be forgotten, never alone again." Tears streaked her face. She shook her head violently. "You're trying to trick me." The entity's grin deepened, childish lilt, fracturing into resonance like a chorus layered over itself. "You already belong. You felt the pulse, didn't you? Your heart stuttered to match ours. You opened the pouch. You read the words. That's invitation enough." Clara hurled salt at it, handfuls scattering across its dress. The apparition screamed not loud but piercing in marrow. Its edges fizzed, flickered. The locket hovered faster, flaring with red fire. Her phone buzzed again. She glimpsed words blurred but desperate. "Do not engage its bargains. It cannot cross without consent. You must survive until dawn." Her shaking hands clawed up the last hidden fragment from the pouch, another note scrawled shorter than the rest. Evelyn's handwriting by then nearly illegible. Clara read through tears, lips moving silently. "They cannot seize what is not freely opened. They mimic, seduce, copy, beg, but illusions mask hollowness. Hold the refusal. Salt what is yours. Trust none of what walks, none of what smiles. Remember, they feed on willingness. Without it, they fade. The apparition hissed suddenly, violently, as if stung by its own exposure. The gown shredded at edges like fog dissolving, yet the voice pressed harder, louder. Clara, dear one, you already called us in your dreams. Why else did you come here? Why else open what was locked? Her mouth went dry, because part of her wanted to answer, but she clenched her jaw, drew the tweezers back over the locket on the bed. The metal sparked again, sizzling the glow. The apparition screamed, reeling backward, its form shivering like candle flame blown thin, but it did not collapse. It only laughed and whispered, "You cannot hold forever, and when your will breaks, we won't knock again. We'll pour through that glass. We'll wear your smile." The photograph rattled loud against the wall. Cracks threaded its glass. The infant within was no longer infant. It had grown, aged to toddler in seconds, gauze gown stretching tight, mouth open in that same too-wide grin. Clara shrieked aloud. Her phone slipped from her hand to the floor. The childlike apparition, within the room, its golden eyes, blazing brighter, now took its first deliberate step through the salt line. The hiss rose. Grains smoked. But this time, the barrier split. Clara staggered back against the wall, watching in helpless terror as the figure crossed, the locket spinning at its chest. The salt line hissed, split, and then guttered out like ash in tide. Clara staggered back as the apparition, child-shaped but impossibly wrong, drifted across the threshold. Golden eyes blazed in the dim chamber. Its gown dragged along the boards like mist, feet never truly meeting the floor. And before its chest hovered, the locket spinning feverishly. The inverted star shifted constantly, as though rewriting itself in languages no mind was built to process. Clara slammed herself against the far wall. Her hands scrabbled for the tweezers, for anything real and iron and human, but the entity only smiled, lips drawn wide enough to hint the bones of jaw beneath. "There you are," it sang with the lilt of a nursery rhyme. "The blood Evelyn promised us. And how sweet you came to us willingly, unlatching locks, reading words with lips so trembling." Clara gasped. "I didn't agree to anything." The apparition tilted its head, golden eyes gleaming. "Consent is not a word in your books alone. You opened, you read, you called with dreams you'll never admit." Her stomach heaved. She wanted to disbelieve, but hadn't she dreamed? Since coming here, hadn't she woken at dawn with the press of voices still echoing? She clenched the tweezers until they nearly cut her palm. "You don't get me. You don't get this house. My blood isn't yours." The apparition laughed, sweet like bells, sour like rot. "All blood is ours. Eventually." It lunged, not with speed of claws, but in sudden closeness, its face mere inches from Clara's, its breath cold as soil after rain. Reflex staved terror. Clara thrust the iron slats against the locket. Sparks hissed. The apparition wailed corral, its body shivering, like cracked glass, but still, it loomed. Her phone buzzed where it had fallen on the floor. Clara dove for it, snatching it up. Screen cracked but alive. Blackwell Legacy. "I'm almost there. 30 minutes. Hold it. You must bind as Evelyn did. 3 points, sigil, vessel, blood. Without you, it breaks free. You have to choose." Clara's throat clenched. She screamed aloud. "I can't do what she did. I'm not." But the apparition cut her with whisper deeper than scream. "Oh, but you are. Every fear in you fed us for years. You studied old faces because you wanted ours. You came here because you could not stay gone. You were chosen before you were born." Its golden eyes softened into something approximating pity. That was worse than cruelty. "Join willingly, Clara. Not like Evelyn, scrambling desperate. Join in strength. You'll see the truth of every archive, every shadow, knowledge older than time." She gagged on tears. Her knees hit wood. No, the locket pulsed again in earth-cracking rhythm. She fumbled over the quilt. Her hands closed on the missing pages again. The final lines of Evelyn's hand swam, like bloodied script. The entity will never die. It cycles into flesh by choice. If you are of me, no. Bind yourself, or break the world. You carry the duty. You carry the cage. Clara shut her eyes. Her arms trembled violently as she pressed her bleeding hand cut from iron's edge against the locket itself. The world exploded white. The apparition shrieked in tones beyond human ear, shaking walls, rattling every window. Clara's hair whipped in unnatural winds. The portrait rattled madly on cedar until glass shattered. Sepia bled into air like smoke funneling back into her skin. Voices wailed. Thousands layered Margaret, Evelyn, children and insects in storms. Through it all, one voice grew clearer. Evelyn's, my blood. Please forgive me. The locket seared Clara's palm, her chest constricted. She felt not possession, but union, an ugly symmetry, a triangle completed. Her heartbeat stuttered and aligned. One beat hers, one beat Locket's, one beat something else. With last will she screamed words she didn't know until they tore from her throat, syllables perhaps planted in bone since birth. The air cracked. The apparition split at seams, light pouring through like stained glass shattered. Its golden eyes dimmed to cinders. Its grin folded to ashdot, and then silence. The locket clattered to the bed, no longer floating, glow withdrawn. Clara fell with it, collapsing, clutching the burned wound on her hand. Her breath scraped, hollow and ragged. Sweat poured down her temples. When her eyes fluttered open again, the room was still. Too still. The portrait lay broken across cedar, fissured glass, staring blank. Its image had faded to shadow outlines. Evelyn's form the faintest etching. The child almost gone. The only true object remaining, pulsing faint, faint. The locket. Her phone buzzed once in distance. A new message. Blackwell Legacy. I'm here. Hold fast. It should be quiet. But Clara, you must tell me. Did you bind? Her eyes burned with tears. She typed back, trembling. Yes, it's in me now. Like Evelyn, I can feel it. Her thumb hovered. Then she added, I won't let it out. A pause. Then you did what none of us could. You bought another century. Clara let the phone fall from her hand. She drew her knees to her chest, rocking faintly. The silence pressed, but different noun, not predator over her shoulder, but something breathing in unison. Inside, she heard whispers when she blinked, but they were quieter, lulled. They would wake again. Of that, she was sure. But for now, she was the cage. She whispered to the cracked ceiling above, I'll keep watch. I'll do what she did. Great-grandmother, I understand now. A faint laugh echoed in deepest folds of her mind, not mocking, not quite cruel, merely patient. The first light of dawn crawled through broken curtains. Clara sat unmoving in its reach, hand blistered but steady, velvet pouch empty, portrait ruined, locket bound, and for a moment the house seemed lighter, dust drifting like gentle snowfall. But she already knew the truth. Evelyn had learned a century before. Some bindings never last forever, and some stories never end. Perhaps you feel safe now that the telling is over. Perhaps you believe the nursery is only a photograph, the locket only an ornament, Evelyn's words nothing more than ink crumbling across 100 years. But you heard it, didn't you? The pulse beneath the silence, the fragment of laughter slipping through cracks. These stories do not end. They pause, watching, waiting in walls, waiting in blood, waiting in the moment you look too long into the shadows of your own house. Evelyn kept her silence until it was too late. Clara nearly broke beneath the weight of inheritance, and now, you know their secret too. That knowledge is not harmless. It binds. You carry it away with you once the night ends, and as you sleep, as you wake in the half-dark hours between clock ticks. Remember, some bindings weaken, some doors never close. If you dare follow where this bloodline leads. If you want to hold the next key, 2 stories better left locked away. Keep your lamp low, hold your breath, and subscribe to the Unseen Anthology. But do not look away. Not yet. The portrait watches.